On New Year's Eve, my mother declared, "You'll watch the children overnight. We've got plans." My sister grinned. "We've already informed them." I just nodded. That evening, they arrived with the kids, but I didn't open the door. A note was pinned to it. When they checked their bank notifications, that's when the real panic set in. For 5 years, I'd been the family's go-to childcare provider. Never formally, of course. No one ever asked. It was just assumed. Birthdays, anniversaries, work functions, vacations by the sea. Whenever my sister had somewhere to be, her kids landed at my house. If my parents had a dinner booked or a spontaneous weekend escape, they'd call at the last second, saying they were dropping off the children. Always framed like they were doing me a favor. No payment, no warning, no regard, just this silent expectation that I'd always agree. And for 5 years I did, because I adore my niece and nephew, truly. But love shouldn't be taken advantage of like that. It had reached a point where even my own children would ask, "Are they coming over again this weekend?" Like we were just the fallback household. This year, I decided things had to shift. It began with a hushed talk with my wife in early December. She was fed up too. We never had holidays to ourselves, never a weekend where we could just be our own family without unexpected visitors under our roof. We both agreed. No more guilt trips, no more last-minute drop-offs. So when New Year's Eve came and my mom uttered those words, "You'll watch the kids overnight, we've got plans," it wasn't even posed as a question. It was an order. My sister stood behind her, smirking. "We've already informed them." She added like it was a done deal. I just nodded. I didn't argue, I didn't explain, I just nodded. That afternoon, I made one small change to the house. I took a sheet of paper, scrawled a few words, and taped it to the front door. "Get real, not ridiculous." Then we waited. At precisely 7:43 p.m., their car rolled into the driveway. My wife was upstairs helping our kids into their pajamas. We had planned a cozy movie night, popcorn, hot chocolate, the whole deal. I lingered by the window, watching as they opened the car doors. 2 children stepped out, my niece 8 and nephew 10, carrying backpacks. My sister and mom didn't even bother escorting them to the door at first. Just waved and shouted something, assuming I'd let them in. But I didn't. I waited. When they reached the porch, they saw the note. That's when the knocking began. Then the yelling, first my mom, then my sister. I stayed still. My kids got anxious. My daughter asked if something was wrong. I said no, we're just not opening the door. Eventually, the shouting stopped. I watched from the hallway as my mom pulled out her phone, probably to call me. I let it ring. Then my sister tried, then texted. None of them saw what was coming. Because 10 minutes later, while they were fuming on the porch, both their phones pinged. I know because I saw my sister's face twist like she'd seen a phantom. They'd finally checked their bank alerts, the shared account. The one I set up years ago when they insisted we all pitch in for the kids' school costs. Emergencies, family expenses. Except I was the only one contributing. Always me, thousands over the years. What they didn't know was that legally it was mine, registered in my name. They'd been using my generosity and my money while ridiculing me behind my back. But on December 30th, I withdrew every last cent. When they saw the balance, $0, that's when the real panic hit, and the night was just beginning. They stood outside for maybe 20 minutes, first the knocking, then the yelling. My mom called 5 times in a row. My sister sent texts like, "Are you for real? What's this nonsense?" And "Open the door now." I didn't respond. I stopped checking my phone after a while. My wife and I were with our kids, watching a movie, trying to keep things normal. Then it got quiet, not the comforting kind, the kind that makes you alert. I passed the window again, just in time to see my mom and sister heading back to their car, leaving the kids behind. They actually left 2 children standing on my porch in 30-degree weather, clutching backpacks, wearing hoodies like it was fall. No jackets, no explanation, no backup plan. My wife just said, "Are they serious?" I opened the door, brought them inside, and locked it behind them. They didn't speak, just stood there, stunned. My niece had tears on her face, a crumpled party hat in her hand. I didn't ask questions. I told them to come in, kick off their shoes, and join the other kids on the couch. We handed them hot chocolate and restarted the movie. We didn't hear from anyone else that night. That's when I realized this wasn't just about using me as free childcare. This was something uglier. There wasn't even a text to check if the kids were okay. No, thank you, no. Apologies, not even fake concern. They were trying to punish me, not by confronting me, but by abandoning the kids like garbage, thinking that would teach me a lesson. At midnight, we raised glasses of sparkling cider. My kids, niece, and nephew all fell asleep in the living room under a heap of blankets. I sat with my wife, pretending everything was fine, but it wasn't. Something felt wrong. It didn't feel like a family spat anymore. It felt like malice. At 1:47 a.m. my phone rang, an unfamiliar number. It was my nephew, the younger one, whispering. He sounded frightened. I could barely make out his words at first, but then it hit me. He was at home. I asked why he wasn't here. He said they never stayed. After we didn't answer the door, my mom and sister told them to wait on the porch for a bit. And we'll return soon. That was over 4 hours ago. I told him to unlock the door and wait for me. I was already lacing up my shoes. My wife didn't ask where I was going. She just said, stay safe. Their house was dark when I arrived. The front door was slightly ajar. No lights. No sound. Inside, I found the kids curled up on the couch, a dead phone between them. No food. No water. Just 2 children left in a cold, empty house with a note on the fridge, don't touch anything. I brought them back, wrapped them in blankets, and tucked them in with my kids. They didn't speak. They were exhausted and scared. I could tell they didn't understand what was happening, why no one came for them. The next morning, I tried calling my mom. Voicemail, same with my sister. I texted both, telling them exactly where the kids were and when I'd picked them up. No response, no questions, just silence. Around noon, my mom finally texted back. You've betrayed us. That's all it said. Not are they safe, not thank you, not even why did you take them, just blame, like I was the one who'd done something terrible. I stared at it for a long time, then showed it to my wife. She didn't speak. She just shook her head and said they haven't seen betrayal yet, and she was right. I didn't hear from them all day. My wife kept asking if I wanted to call again just to check. I said no. I wanted to see how far they'd push this, how long they could go without asking about their children. It had already been over 12 hours. Around 6 p.m., I checked the security camera I'd installed at their place a while back. For the kids' safety. They didn't know it was there. Motion sensor triggered. Someone, likely my mom, had stopped by, stayed 2 minutes, then left. Never went inside. The door was still ajar when she arrived, and still ajar when she left. She didn't even close it. That night, my wife and I fed the kids dinner, let them choose the movie, and let them stay up late again. I could tell they didn't want to go back. No one said it outright, but they were more relaxed here, laughing, eating without being told to stop, not treading lightly. My niece whispered to my daughter, I like it better here. The next morning at 7:38 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. It was their father, my sister's ex-husband. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly a year. He sounded like he'd been driving all night. He said, I heard what happened. Are they with you? Turns out one of the kids had called him using my wife's phone, just to say hello. They hadn't seen him in 9 months, not since the custody fight. My sister had blocked his number from their phones, told them he'd moved on and didn't want contact. But he'd been trying. Sending money monthly, calling weekly, writing letters that were never delivered. And now, after hearing his kids were left alone in an empty house on New Year's Eve, he got in his car and drove from 3 states away. No lawyer, just came. I told him they were safe, that we had them, that they weren't going anywhere. When I hung up, I felt something shift, like we were crossing a point of no return, because now it wasn't just me. It wasn't just about disrespect or being used. It was about custody, neglect, actual child endangerment, and I was the one holding the line. That afternoon, my mom and sister showed up, storming up the porch, furious, banging on the door like nothing had happened. I opened it a few inches. My sister shouted, where are my kids? I said, safe. Unlike when you left them alone in an unlocked house all night. She tried to shove past me, but my wife was there, blocking the doorway. She told them to back off, said they weren't taking anyone. My mom started her usual speech about family unity, loyalty, how I had no right. My wife cut her off. She said, you abandoned 2 children like they didn't matter. Don't talk to me about loyalty. They both started yelling, talking over each other, trying to make it about me, about betrayal, about how I'd always held a grudge. I didn't respond. I was done justifying myself. Eventually, my wife slammed the door in their faces. They stood outside screaming, threatening to call someone, saying lawyers would get involved. Then they left, and still didn't ask to see the kids. That night, I sat with my nephew on the couch. He asked, is my dad really coming? I said yes. And I wasn't lying. That night had an eerie calm, not peaceful, more like the stillness before a storm. My wife and I were tense. The kids were playing board games on the floor, laughing like nothing was wrong, but it didn't feel real. Everything felt too quiet. At 9:15 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was their dad again. He'd crossed into our state about an hour and a half away. He'd driven nearly 11 hours straight, only stopping for gas. When I asked if he wanted to stay over, he said, not yet. I need to see them first. At exactly 11:03 p.m., his car pulled into our driveway. I watched as he got out, leaving the car door open. My niece and nephew spotted him and ran barefoot into the yard. He dropped to his knees and hugged them like they were his lifeline. I hadn't seen that look on his face since before the divorce, back when they still had weekends at his place, before my sister poisoned everything. After they came inside, we got them settled with our kids. Then, while my wife stayed upstairs, he and I sat at the kitchen table. He looked exhausted, clothes rumpled, face worn. But his eyes were sharp, determined. He pulled out a manila folder from his backpack and slid it across, said, "You need to see this." Inside were over 20 letters, birthday cards, hand-drawn sketches, personal notes, all for his kids. All unopened, some marked "Return to Sender." One had "Don't give her this" in my sister's handwriting on the envelope. He showed me screenshots of bank transfers, not child support, separate, gifts, grocery help, new clothes. All sent to my mom or sister. No receipts, no gratitude, just silence. Then came the real shock, a notarized affidavit from his lawyer, dated 4 days before New Year's Eve. A petition for emergency custody, signed, sealed, but unfiled. Until that morning. He hadn't planned to use it unless something drastic happened. He still hoped they'd work it out. Then he got a call, not from me. From his old neighbor in the next town, someone who followed my sister on social media. She'd posted a photo on New Year's Eve, a blurry bar shot, everyone drunk. Champagne flying, caption read, "No kids, no hassle, free at last." That's when he knew. I asked what he planned to do, he didn't pause. Said, "I'm taking them with me, for good." Then he dropped another bombshell. CPS had been investigating my sister for months. Unofficial reports. A school counselor flagged my niece showing up with a hand-shaped bruise, saying she got in trouble for using the microwave. My mom brushed it off, called it a misunderstanding, said my sister was just stressed. It wasn't the first report. But now, after New Year's Eve, after she left the kids alone, after I picked them up, after they were never reported missing, things escalated fast. His lawyer filed everything that morning. My texts, screenshots, photos of the open door, timestamps, footage from the camera I'd installed last year. By the time we finished talking, it was nearly 2 a.m. He slept on our couch, said he wasn't risking a hotel. That night I couldn't sleep, kept replaying it all, the door, the call, the silence from my family. It was like they'd all lost it at once. The next morning, just after 10 a.m., my sister texted, "You'll regret this. It's war." 2 hours later, she came home to police lights and 2 officers on her porch. A social worker was already inside. Her kids were with us. Her ex had the custody papers, and the house she'd left unlocked on New Year's Eve. Yeah, the neighbors reported it too. She hadn't just lost her babysitter, she'd lost her facade. She showed up at my door 3 hours later. No warning. No text, just her standing there like a hurricane in human form. My mom was right behind, arms folded, chin up like that made her intimidating. They didn't knock, just stood there waiting. I opened the door and stepped out, closing it behind me. I didn't want the kids to hear. My sister didn't ask about her children, not once. She didn't ask if they were safe, fed, or if they'd cried themselves to sleep. She didn't ask how they felt seeing their dad after 9 months. She didn't ask anything real. Instead, she said, "You went behind my back and took my kids." I told her the truth. I didn't take anyone. I picked them up because she left them alone in an unlocked house all night, and I kept them safe because she didn't come back. That wasn't betrayal. That was basic humanity. She didn't listen. She was too far gone. My mom jumped in, blaming my wife, saying she'd turned me against family. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was sad. My wife was the only one who hadn't abandoned those kids. They kept at it, tag-teaming me like always. Talking fast, accusing me of disloyalty, manipulation, turning the kids against them. All while standing on my porch, outside a house they treated like a dumping ground. Then my sister said something that stopped it all. She said, "You think you're the hero, but they're mine. You don't decide where they go." That's when the door opened. Their father stood there holding a legal document, his voice steady, eyes locked. He said, "Actually, the court does. And they already have." She froze. He handed her the order, signed, official, effective immediately. Full emergency custody granted. Visitation suspended pending review. Her face went white. My mom tried to snatch it, but he held firm. Said, "You'll get your copy, through your lawyer." And then, right there on my porch, my sister lost it. She lunged forward, trying to push past me into the house, screaming that we had no right. That she'd take the kids, that she'd ruin us all, but she didn't get far. My wife was already behind the door, calling the police. Within 10 minutes they were back, the same officers from earlier. This time with a restraining order her ex had filed hours before, now active after her outburst. She was told to leave. My mom tried to argue, but they weren't listening. This wasn't a family argument. This was legal. The officers escorted them to their car. My mom turned back, gave me a look like I'd betrayed her, but she didn't speak. I didn't either. What do you say to people who left 2 children in an empty house on a holiday night, then came back angrier about losing control than losing their kids? That evening, we sat around the dinner table with 4 kids and 2 adults who had finally done right. The kids were quiet at first, then hungry, then silly, then tired. Like normal kids in a safe place. Later, I caught my nephew in the hallway just outside the room where his dad was unpacking. I asked if he was okay. He nodded, then whispered, "Is he really staying?" I said yes. But what I didn't say, what I couldn't say, was this: and they're not coming back. The days after were strange. A mix of relief, quiet, and a lingering sense that something wasn't done. Like we'd stepped off a ride, but the rush hadn't faded. The kids stayed with us the whole time. Their dad didn't want to rush them. He wanted them to feel this wasn't just a rescue. It was a new start. He was a different man than I recalled. Steady. Focused. Not the broken guy my sister painted to gain sympathy. That version of him. A lie. A story crafted to make her the victim. But the truth was clear. He'd always tried to stay connected. She just blocked him. In those last days before they left, I watched the kids closely. How they acted when no one was barking orders, when they weren't tiptoeing around tempers, when there wasn't a clock on their joy. They changed, even in a week. My niece asked if she could paint her nails. My nephew asked if he could sleep in until 10. These were kids learning they could be kids. One night, while everyone slept, I caught their dad at the kitchen table, looking through a small envelope. Inside were drawings they'd made for him, ones he'd never seen, mailed in letters returned unopened. He sat there, flipping through them like treasures. That night, I realized I hadn't just been watching these kids for 5 years. I'd been protecting them, holding back the harm, covering for what their mother refused to see. But protecting isn't saving, and that was something only their father could do now. 3 days later, the courts finalized everything. Emergency custody became permanent. The kids were officially going home with their dad. My sister didn't contest it. She didn't even show up to the hearing. My mom was listed as uninvolved in the filing, which still makes me chuckle. The night before they left, we let them pick dinner. Pizza, ice cream, waffles all at once. We put on a movie, built a blanket fort, and let them stay up late. My daughter fell asleep with her head on my niece's lap. My son and nephew passed out mid-movie. It felt like a farewell party masked as a sleepover. The next morning, their dad packed the car. We helped load their new clothes, toys, drawings, not the backpacks they arrived with, real bags. Their things, my niece hugged me tightly, then stepped back and said, "I didn't think adults could fix things like this." My nephew said, "You didn't let them abandon us." No, I didn't, I couldn't. Their dad thanked us a dozen times, then drove off slowly, waving, kids smiling in the backseat like a burden had lifted. That night, I got a text from him. A photo of the kids asleep in their new beds in their new home, with night lights glowing and books on their pillows. The caption said, "Safe. We haven't heard from my sister since." My mom sent one last text, 2 words, "You'll see." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a final veiled threat, like she still thought this was a power game. But she doesn't get it. This wasn't about power or winning. It was about children and what they deserve. No more broken promises, no more abandoned porches, no more family guilt dressed up as love. This was the final break. The line that couldn't be crossed again. And maybe at last the start of something better for those kids. Because on that cold, fractured New Year's Eve, when they knocked on my door, thinking they could dump their mess one more time, they didn't just lose control. They lost the illusion, and I stopped being their cleanup crew for good.